After the Gallipoli evacuation, the 14th Battalion returned to Egypt. The recruitment drives back in Australia were successful. The AIF was expanding and new officers were needed. Jacka was selected and his commission as a second lieutenant was gazetted on the 29th of April 1916. A 14th Battalion member, Private Arthur Tulloch, noted that Jacka preferred the company of the rank rather than fellow officers. Tulloch also recognised that the men of Jacka's platoon would have followed him anywhere. From around this time, Jacka had an abrasive attitude, the scorn of which could be felt by both men and officers alike. On the 1st of June 1916, the battalion left Egypt for France and the Western Front. After sailing the Mediterranean, they arrived in southern France. The battalion travelled by train to the nursery sector of Armentières in northern France. The first raid in this sector was undertaken by a new officer to the battalion, Lieutenant Harold Wanless. Wanless come from an upper-class family. Jacka was unimpressed by any officer who had not risen through the ranks on battlefield merit. The trench raid took place on the 2nd of July 1916. Wanless was hit 3 times and had collapsed in no man's land. Most of the men were wounded. Steve DeRouge, the same man who had assisted Jacka in his VC action, carried Wanless to safety. General Haig and the Allied command were seeking a vital breakthrough on the gently undulating land of the Somme River east of Albert. On the 1st of July 1916, after a week-long bombardment, the British troops went over the top and walked to their deaths. On the first day of the Somme, there was a catastrophic loss of 57,000 casualties, of which near 20,000 were killed. This was the worst day in British military history. Only small advances had been gained. General Haig was not deterred by these casualties and the slaughter continued. It was not long before more men were required and the 14th Battalion was called from northern France to the Somme battlefield. After much marching and billeting in villages, the 14th arrived at Warloy on the 27th of July 1916. The Australian 1st Division had been in battle at Pozieres for some time and had been successful in taking the township of Pozieres. Mind you, the township had been completely destroyed and pulverised to a red brick powder. While the 14th Battalion and the rest of the 4th Division were billeting in Warloy, the 2nd Division was sent in to Pozieres lines to relieve the 1st. The objective of the 2nd Division was to attack Pozieres Ridge, which was high ground located on the other side of Pozieres Township. The ridge had a commanding view all the way to Albert. After the 1st Division was relieved by the 2nd, the 1st come through the township of Warloy early one morning. Edgar Rule remembered what he saw. They came by one morning fairly early, having spent the night around Albert. Although we knew it was stiff fighting, our eyes opened when we saw these men march by. Those who watched them will never forget as long as they live. They looked like men who had been to hell. Almost without exception, each man looked drawn and haggard, and so dazed that they appeared to be walking in a dream, and their eyes looked glassy and starry. Quite a few were silly, and these were the only noisy ones in the crowd. In just 4 days, the 2nd Division lost 3,500 men, trying to advance to the prominent point on the Pozieres Ridge, called the Windmill. Prior to the war, a grinding windmill was located on this site, as it was the highest point in the area. On the 4th of August 1916, the 14th Battalion's time to enter the battle had come. It was reported that the vast majority of the 14th men were eager and keen to get in and do their bit in the battle. That night they left Warloy and marched to Albert. For the men, the war was very close. Much of the town of Albert had been damaged, and the constant noise of the artillery could be heard all the time. All Australian soldiers marching to Pozieres come through Albert and pass the Basilica of Albert. Australian soldiers referred to the town as Albert or simply Bert. Albert was a major British centre. The statue of the Virgin Mary holding aloft the baby Jesus was allegedly found by a shepherd in the Middle Ages and was credited with miraculous properties and the church received many pilgrims. During the German bombardment in 1915, the church tower was hit, and the Madonna toppled and hung precariously. The church secured the Madonna as best they could, and the statue remained so. The Australians christened her Fanny Chirac, after the famous Australian swimmer who won the 100 metres gold medal at the 1912 Stockholm Olympic Games. A superstition developed among troops that whoever knocked down the Virgin would lose the war. The British finally knocked her down in 1918. The Madonna was never found, and a replica now adorns the reconstructed basilica.